If one goes back to the original Pali and Sanskrit, one has got the terms Sangskrita and Asangskrita, literally compounded and uncompounded, or as we more often say, conditioned and unconditioned. But the literal meaning, the literal translation is definitely compounded and uncompounded, or confected and unconfected. That would be still more literal. But when we speak of conditionality, when we speak of phenomena arising in dependence on certain conditions, the term there is usually pratyaya, as in pratitya samutpada, or pachaya in Pali, pratitya samutpada. So yes, it can be misleading to use the same term, conditioned, for that which is pratyaya, and also that which is Sanskrita. Yes, this can give rise sometimes to confusion. One can speak, for instance, of transcendental conditionality. That does not translate, uncompounded conditionality, but it translates positive, irreversible conditionality, as I've termed it. Of course, there is the question of the relation between that positive, irreversible conditionality, which you get at the upper end of the spiral, and the Sanskrita. That raises a quite different question, because those two terms seem to apply to the same order of reality. But I would say that the solution lies in the fact that in the one case you're thinking of that order of reality in temporal terms, in terms of duration, and in the other in spatial terms. Because that which is incomposite is that which doesn't have parts, and if a thing has parts, it occupies space. So if you say that something doesn't have parts and doesn't occupy space, well, you're using clearly spatial terms. In the same way, when you speak of a transcendental, irreversible sequence of conditions, in as much as you speak of it as being irreversible and as a sequence, you're using temporal language, you're speaking the language of duration. So perhaps it can be seen in that sort of way, because we cannot but think and speak of things either in terms of time or in terms of space. But ultimately, the two orders, or the two ways of speaking, coincide in their meaning. Though it's very difficult to bring the two meanings together, the two modes of thought together, in a single act of thought, one might say.
Bhante, I'm not quite clear there. What do we use the word condition to mean then? If it doesn't mean our...
Well, actually, in a sense, one uses it in two almost contradictory senses. You use the conditioned, for that, which arises in dependence on conditions. But then, of course, you've got two orders of happening, let's say, where there is an arising of things, in dependence on conditions. One reversible, where you have a cyclical order, and the other irreversible, where you get a spiral order. So within the spiral order there is conditionality. You call it a transcendental conditionality. But that transcendental conditionality corresponds to the unconditioned. So there is a sort of verbal contradiction. Do you see what I mean? But that is because in the one case you're using the language of time, on the other you're using the language of space. Now one can go a little further than that, but perhaps we'll leave it there for the time being. But yes, that sort of double use of the term conditionality and so on, it can be confusing.
So I think you said in one of the metric charts, the perfect vision, that conditioned means limited. I think you said that there.
Well, condition means arising in dependence on conditions, and arising only when the appropriate conditions are present, and in that sense limited, in that sense contingent.
In Buddhism, is it correct to use the word unconditioned? Is there anything which is unconditioned?
If one uses unconditioned to translate the Sanskrit Asangskrita or Pali Asankata, well yes, you can use the expression unconditioned, but that's not a literal translation. The literal translation, as I said, would be uncompounded or incomposite or unconfected, not put together. I mean, that which is Sanskrita is the same word as in the Sanskrit language. Sanskrita is that which is put together. The Asanskrita is that which is not put together. It is not put together because it doesn't consist of any parts. It's, in philosophical terminology, it's simple. It's impartite. It cannot be taken apart because it doesn't consist of parts. It is, in a manner of speaking, just one thing.
Would it be better to avoid the word unconditioned where possible?
Perhaps it would be, except that we don't, in English usage, in Western philosophical usage, we don't really have a term such as the incomposite. It doesn't have any sort of resonance to it, it doesn't have any sort of connotation, whereas the unconditioned does. Though, perhaps it may be, so to speak, more nuisance than it's worth this time if it leads to confusion, with the other usage of the term conditioned.
I remember some of the early lectures pointing that there was an apparent paradox because the transcendental experience, which has been described, I think, in terms of unconditioned experience, had to be discontinuous with the path and the conditions that you were setting up.
Yeah.
So is this apparent, is this discontinuity just because of the terms that we use? Or is it actually, in a way, an experiential discontinuity?
There is discontinuity in the sense that there is a qualitative difference. But on the other hand, there is, one might say, no discontinuity, in as much as within the spiral, so to speak, the first of the transcendental links, or nidanas, arises in dependence on the last of the mundane links. So strictly speaking, I suppose one would have to say that there is neither complete discontinuity nor complete continuity, but a relation of conditionality. That is just what the term conditionality means. Neither uninterrupted, neither uninterrupted continuity or an actual breach, which is in a way something that we find it quite difficult to think in terms of. So yes, it's one continuous process, but not continuous in the sense of the opposite of discontinuous.